So with that, I'd like to introduce Ralph Gammon, Senior Analyst at Infosource. Many of you know Ralph as a regular presenter at the Capture and IDP conferences over the last 18 years. Today, Ralph will be discussing the ingredients behind a successful Capture and IDP solution. So with that, Ralph, take it away.
All right, thanks, Aaron. All right, this is exciting. A few months earlier than our normal in-person conference was held, but yeah, this is kind of our first go at this, kind of our initial session for the virtual version of the legendary Capture and IDP conference. And like many of you have attended that event annually, which was held first in Long Island and then outside of Chicago. I will certainly miss the in-person contact, interactions, networking, golf, etc. A lot of etc. But we just Infosource didn't have the bandwidth this year to put the event together in person. So we're going to at least take this year and try virtual conference. We really don't want to lose all the momentum and value we've built up over the years. Plus, we'd like to think we've learned a few things about, what makes an interesting and successful presentation related specifically to the Capture and IDP market. No, I'm not going to start having a beer and spouting off some controversial predictions at the moment. Maybe that'll come later, but we do hope to deliver you with some condensed, insightful, and important knowledge that you can apply to your businesses. And in the spirit of the conference, we left time for discussion at the end of our presentation. So please queue up your questions in the Q&A feature as I might make my way through. I want to thank everyone again for attending. So as Aaron mentioned, this is the first of 6 planned virtual sessions that will take place over the next year, all on topics relevant and focused on the Capture and IDP market. A little bit about the title. It's summertime here where I live, and do a lot of barbecuing during the summer. So that was kind of on my mind. We were trying to come up with something. And, in my experience, it takes a combination of things to make a successful barbecue. You have to have the right ingredients. You got to mix them properly. Your timing has to be good. And you have to know your audience. I see similar challenges for ISVs in the Capture and IDP market. And with the infusion of AI over the past several years, there are more great ingredients than ever out there for putting together compelling solutions. And it's how the vendors mix them and how the vendors, put it all together and then serve them up to the market looking to address their business problem that really creates a successful application. So as part of that, thinking about all that, we're going to review our recently published annual Capture and IDP vendor matrix, which Infosource has been putting together for many years, and which basically ranks who we view as the leading vendors in the market. So here's a look at the agenda we'll follow in today's session. First, I'll provide you with a little background on Infosource for those of you not familiar with us. Then we'll discuss the criteria we use to create the matrix. After that, we'll take a look at the matrix itself, the 2024 version, and I'll discuss some of the reasons we had more stars than ever before. Then I've got a brand new graphic to share with you. It's an update of one I've used in the past, designed to provide a breakdown of the different categories of vendors that we find competing in the Capture and IDP market, along with an explanation of how the market has evolved to reach its current state. Finally, how can we do a presentation today and not touch on the topic of generative AI? And as promised, we'll close out things with some Q&A. So, please prepare some tough questions. We don't want this to get boring after all. So, who's Infosource? We're a global analyst firm with a team of analysts that provide sales data and forecasts for capture software, as well as the scanner, printer, and multifunction device markets. Our software practice was launched through the acquisition in 2020 of Harvey Spencer Associates. Many of you may be familiar with HSA, which actually founded the conference and did a great job covering the Capture and IDP space for multiple years before the acquisition. Personally, I spent more than 20 years as editor and then editor and publisher of a newsletter called the Document Imaging Report, DIR, which was also acquired by Infosource and covers this space as well as some related space like printing and ECM. During my time with DI, I was fortunate to have a regular speaking gig at the HSA conference, and where I best became known, for my annual predictions. So as part of our software practice at Infosource, we publish two major reports per year. One is a global state of the market report, which my colleague Petra Beck is compiling right now based on data from 2023. This report includes our market sizing estimates and forecasts and breakdowns of the market based on various metrics like vertical markets, regions, use cases, and more. Our second major report covers our annual Capture and IDP vendor matrix, which was published last month, and that is where the focus will be on today. So this year's matrix ranks more than 20 of the leading vendors in the Capture and IDP software market based on their strategies and capabilities, which is the y-axis, and their execution in the market, which is the x-axis. So who exactly is it that we're ranking? Well, it's vendors that participate in what we define as the Capture and IDP space, which you can see described here in these in these points I've made here. One thing I will note is that Infosource has covered this Capture and IDP space for more than 20 years, well before the term IDP or intelligent document processing came about. But it's important to note that our definition of capture always provided for what became known as IDP. As you can see, we've always explained that capture is about understanding and extracting meaningful data from all sorts of input to be leveraged in business transactions. So what AI has done is really inject steroids into the ability to accomplish this. So that's our definition of capture and IDP. Here's a list of characteristics that we're looking for as we rate the vendors. This is kind of what we view as the ideal futuristic capture application. It's something that works well in today's market. But we also, look at vendors that we think will have staying power for the next 5 or 10 years down the road. You'll see that one of the characteristics we've always looked for is this idea of multi-channel capture. So really, our vendor doesn't just, our vision doesn't just include document capture, but also, capture from voice and video inputs, which we think will become increasingly important for transactions in the future. However, it's interesting to note that one of the ironic trends that we've seen with the introduction of AI, which you think would have the ability, to expand the types of input that we are understanding, is that most vendors have really doubled down on their focus on documents and are really leveraging AI to process a broader variety and breadth of document types and really go deeper into how they are processing these documents. So what that tells us is that documents really continue to be the lifeblood of business transactions. You can see we also consider elements like end-to-end transactional processing capabilities. So vendors score higher if Capture and IDP is more than a point solution for them. We also like the idea of on-demand discrete cloud services that can be called upon as needed, especially as the market evolves. So how does this work? Well, basically, I blindfold myself, threw a bunch of labeled darts at a picture of the matrix taped to my basement wall. And voila, I had a matrix. No, just kidding. Go back, my history, like my first real job out of college a million years ago, I was a sports editor, still continue to be a sports fan, if many of you know me. And as most sports fans do, I enjoy creating rankings. So basically, took a bunch of vendor submissions and demos and briefings. We ranked them in each of these categories that you can see listed here. And we weighted the rankings and scored the vendors, based on how close they were to the next vendors in the rankings. So really a, complex process, but put together what we think is a pretty good, solid, defendable matrix. And you can see our highest ranking is in the y-axis, which is basically our highest weighting in the y-axis goes to the technology stack, including AI. This is basically what's under the hood, what really makes your product work and hum. On the x-axis, it's really how big and diverse is your customer base. how global, how many different use cases are you addressing? And it's just a caveat here. This doesn't mean that some of the vendors, that rank lower don't have great technology and great strategies. It's just that they might be more specialized. And in our current iteration of the matrix, which I have to say, evolves every year to kind of address what we see as the market conditions, they just might not score as high. And later, as I mentioned, as I kind of previewed, I'll share with you a graph that attempts to divide the various vendors into clusters that we could potentially, and we may do this down the road, maybe use AI to help us do it, but kind of create a series of different matrices. So this is kind of a big general matrix that ranks. Like I said, all these vendors have good technology. Even if they made the matrix, it means we think they have really solid technology, and this is our criteria that we base it on. So as I mentioned, the matrix is always evolving, and this slide should give you an idea of some of the hottest features that we see in today's market that are really driving some of the changing positions. AI, of course, is quite a ton of buzz. I mean, everybody has it now and is working with some form of it. I mean, it's basically table stakes. You need it to stay relevant. Second, while cloud capabilities are important, what we've seen is that Capture and IDP continues to lag behind some other markets when it comes to cloud adoptions and from cloud adoptions. We see stuff like regulations, the conservative nature of some of the major verticals, and cost, quite frankly. These are some of the reasons that, especially at large enterprises, cloud capture we're seeing implemented often as a complementary feature to an existing on-prem application as opposed to a complete switch out. This is why we see hybrid cloud capabilities as increasingly important in this market. Finally, we are increasingly being Capture and IDP is increasingly being incorporated in broader workflows, not just used to hand off data with Capture and IDP as the first step. With the continued adoption of electronically driven business processes, it's more important than ever that capture can be triggered in the middle of a workflow, or depending on what is captured, it can trigger an additional workflow, like asking for more information or even improving an application or a claim. Capture and IDP's continuing ability to automate the processing of more complex document sets has really been a driver in this expansion toward end-to-end automation. So here you go. Here's this year's 2024 matrix. Please take a look and come up with any questions you might have based on the positions of the vendors. I'll let it sit here on the screen for a minute or two. Remember, enter any questions you have in the Q&A section. So you can see on the matrix, I mean, the x-axis, this is execution in the market. So it's not surprising that some of the market share leaders, that we track are also going to be some of the leaders in the execution. The y-axis reflects, not only incorporation of AI, but actually, a complete technology set that enables vendors to do end-to-end document processing. So here's a bit of a smaller version. You can continue to check out the matrix if you want, but an explanation of kind of the different categories. This year we had more stars than ever before, and I think this has to do with improvements that we've seen in the technology stacks, primarily driven by the increasing use of AI and the maturity with which AI is being applied. And the addition of generative AI is kind of a cherry on top of everything for now. There is some crossover, kind of in these other three categories. I mean, these are all vendors seeking to become stars. I mean, generally, disruptors might be a bit more advanced in the technology or the development of their AI stacks or their AI technology. And the competitors might have a stronger market position. I mean, if you look at someone like Umango here, they're kind of in an interesting position. I mean, they're just starting their AI journey, but they kind of have a unique position because of some of their technology partnerships with the leading MFP hardware vendors. And then, along these lines, you look at vendors like Kodak Alaris and Iron Mountain, also vendors that are kind of new to our matrix. but they both really have some interesting customer bases to mine. And they've kind of taken the approach of infusing their Capture and IDP applications with a best of breed engines, starting by leveraging some of the services offered by the hyperscalers. And you can see how, the introduction of generative AI might kind of fit into those models. So that gives you an idea of, so some of the interesting vendors and, some of the interesting dynamics we see in the matrix, in this year's matrix. So who kind of made the crossover into the star from the past, and how were they able to do it? These four vendors had been, maybe competitors or disruptors in past years, and maybe even just explorers. And UiPath, for instance, has kind of moved fairly rapidly from kind of it would be considered just someone. I mean, starting out. I mean, granted, they have $1 billion RPA business that they developed, and they've aggressively then leveraged that to pursue expansion into the IDP market, leveraging a strong global customer base and partner channel, as well as an acquisition and some internal development, um, you know, and then throwing some generative AI into the mix, and have really increased their market share significantly over the past few years. Highland's always been one of our market share leaders thanks to its deep market penetration for managing document-driven processes through its ECM and content services suite. Its Capture and IDP, has always been solid, if not spectacular. So it's always kept them kind of a step behind the stars. But however, within the last, I think within the last year, they announced kind of a new IDP product based on some OEM technology, pretty advanced technology that we think is going to increase their flexibility and increase their ability to address their customer base and really move upstream in the Capture and IDP space. Microsoft, of course, Microsoft's doing a great job on a number of fronts, kind of bringing Capture and IDP to every desktop. Through its partnership with OpenAI, it's got some great generative AI technology. They've, pretty much introduced some out-of-the-box capture processes into SharePoint Premium. So, as I mentioned, they all kind of also have some services. So they're kind of really doing a cool job, pushing Capture and IDP into the market kind of in a broad, desktop sense. And Tungsten's formerly Kofax. They've always been a market share leader. Maybe they haven't been the most innovative company in recent years, but recently came out with a kind of a refresh, really added some, doubled up their AI efforts, added some generative AI, expanded what they're trying to do with end-to-end automation. It'd be interesting to see if they can maintain this, but they continue to be a market share leader, and just gave a little bump with kind of some of their improved, what we feel to be improved strategy and capabilities in their product line within the last year. Okay, so as promised, here's that cluster slide that I was talking about. I'm interested to any feedback on this. One more sports analogy for you here, I guess. This is kind of my John Madden at the telestrator slide, if you get that. So it's gonna do some pointing out here. So kind of this was kind of what the capture market maybe looked like 10 years ago, maybe even 10 years before that. You basically had these image processing and OCR SDKs, and you had a bunch of dedicated capture vendors that somewhat delved into workflow, and you had these ECM vendors that also had workflow, but then also did capture. They kind of leveraged these toolkits to create these scanning and document understanding applications, and eventually you got to invoices, and so we saw some of these procure to pay, accounts payable focused vendors kind of leverage this stuff to do. Really, what we're doing was structured forms, tax forms, and any sort of structured form, invoices, which we considered to be semi-structured forms. Okay, so then about 2016, we started to see kind of this availability of these open source AI engines, and really the processing power to run them, many cases on the cloud, but in some cases on-prem. So what we saw is, we saw some companies that were maybe experts in AI, companies like Hyperscience, a few other ones that were really looking, okay, well, we're working with these AI models, so how can we, how can we create a viable enterprise application with this stuff? And, they started looking at this, kind of this existing document capture market, saw how limited it was. And so, started applying AI to kind of, really this is what kind of gave birth to this idea of IDP, intelligent document process. And the RPA vendors who at the time were, really focused on, let's say, taking data from a structured environment and move it into another structured environment, decided, well, there's a lot of processes that start with unstructured input. So they started looking at, leveraging these models for doing IDP as well. And say, a lot of their technology is kind of based on learning from keystrokes. Some of these open or some of these AI models can also, learn by example. You key in from the same document or the same type of document multiple times, and these things, the models start to learn and create applications from it. So that's kind of where we're at about maybe 2018 and 2018, 2019, we start to see, these guys, these capture vendors, the capture workflow vendors, kind of these ECM vendors, um, the enterprise application guys are pretty smart too, and they start to see, hey, well, these guys are all doing document processing using these open source AI vendors or open source AI models. So why can't we just do that too? We obviously have a document processing experience. So really about 2020, really this AI becomes embedded in all these type of applications, and on top of that, you start to see these hyperscalers, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, they all have their own AI engines, and they decide they're going to train their AI engines for document processing too, and make them available as cloud services. End users, they're not products. You still need to build some rules and some interfaces around it. We see end users do this. We've also seen some, capture workflow vendors, as I mentioned, people like Iron Mountain, Kodak, Alaris, kind of build workflow and interfaces that kind of are able to leverage these things. So this is kind of where the market kind of 2021, most of 2022. Then what happens at the end of 2022? Hey, generative AI kind of hits the market. We start to see it for image generation, then we start to see it for text generation, and then people kind of quickly figure out these large language models that the generative AI applications are based on can understand documents as well. And you can start doing stuff like interrogating documents, getting matching pairs back. You can do summarization, you can do some entity extraction. And these models are readily available. They're available on the cloud. Everyone can start playing around with them. So we basically see, all these application vendors on the bottom here start to experiment with generative AI and start to infuse their products with that, complementary to what they're already doing with this stuff and complementary to what they're already doing with this stuff. So that's kind of, like I said, it would be possible for us, hopefully, with the help of AI, if I can figure out how to leverage it correctly for this, to create separate matrices for really all these clusters of vendors. And it's not to say that one vendor just sits in, one area. I mean, you look at Abby's got an SDK. Abby uses, open source AI. Abby's got an application, open text. IBM, the bigger vendors kind of play in multiple of these areas, but the P2P, Tungsten's got a P2P part of their business in addition to capture workflow part of their business. But it would be kind of neat to be able to create different matrices, and that may be a little fair. As I said, trust me, I feel a lot of feedback already from vendors not happy with their positions. But as I said, we put a lot of work into it, pretty comfortable where they're at. But the matrix continues to evolve. It's look at it as kind of a living document. Okay, so as I said earlier, what kind of presenter, what kind of industry guru would I be if I didn't at least touch on the topic of generative AI and what it's doing to the market right now? So,
Ralph,
yes, go ahead.
quickly, I just wanted to address the attendees. We are having some challenges with the Q&A feature. My apologies for that. So I want to ask everyone, if you have questions, and I'm already seeing many, please enter those in the chat section, and we'll address those after the finish of the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. So this is our this isn't our beta test, but it's our version 1 of the virtual conference here. So, okay, you can see some of my thoughts here on generative AI kind of listed on the left. I mean, generative AI is not, it can do some really cool stuff, but it's not a complete solution. I mean, it still makes errors. I mean, one of the articles I recently read today was aside from the fact that generative AI companies are really struggling to create business models, and the nice thing about Capture and IDP is we do have this industry does have a business model, and as I mentioned, it was kind of one of the first areas that were for traditional AI to where the rubber hit the road and was able to generate some revenue. But I mean, there's a lot of handholding that still takes place with generative AI in business applications. I mean, this was so. I mean, if the goal of you know of Capture and IDP is straight through processing, generative AI can be used as a tool to help with that, but it can't really do that, on its own. So, yeah, we are seeing it though effectively used for stuff like, reducing setup time. It can be used to help with manual validation, to reduce the number of people that might have to look at something by using generative AI as kind of someone to help validate. It's good for desktop document interrogation, but once again, it's a very manual process and maybe not something that was traditionally addressed by the Capture and IDP market. But one way it's helping maybe expand this market a bit. And there are challenges, of course. The original stuff is around privacy and security. As I said, most of the stuff is available on the public cloud, but we did see that a lot of that stuff quickly addressed, and there are options to add security and privacy are much further along than they were a year and a half ago when generative AI first kind of was making its big splash. As I mentioned, hallucination, inaccuracy, ethics, copyrights. I mean, all this stuff that some of the stuff around ethics and copyright, if court cases fall the right way, could have major effects in this market down the road. So, yeah, just questionable about putting all your eggs kind of in the generative AI basket. It's also worth though, taking a look at the graph on the right though here. This graph kind of gives you an idea of how early on we really are in the adoption of generative AI for enterprise business applications. It basically shows that in 2023, enterprise investment in traditional AI, which IDP falls under, was almost 30 times greater when we talk about cash spending than what was spent on generative AI. In addition, I found another survey talked about, while 75% of the respondents of the survey said they were experimenting with generative AI, only 9% said that they had widely adopted the technology. So, hype cycle is always ahead of the adoption cycle in terms of technology. I mean, that's having been covering this market, that even holds true in the IDP space for the 20 years that I've been around. That all said, there's likely a future place for LLMs, especially, I'll narrow it down to that in the Capture and IDP industry, because they are pretty powerful. I mean, the top chart on the right, I mean, this gives you an idea really of how much funding is being invested in generative AI technologies. And this funding is being used for development, and some of the development that I've seen is going to have a positive effect on how LLMs can be leveraged for Capture and IDP. In addition, kind of this is kind of a double-edged sword. So all this funding is being out there, which is creating more options. Is this going to help reduce the price? I mean, this is one of the challenges I think we're seeing right now. Is this stuff can be expensive. I mean, I've seen pricing all over the map for it implemented. How much of a premium you have to pay for it to include it in your IDP solution. Part of this has to do with token processing and maybe what kind of deal the ISV can negotiate with the LLM vendors. But, is the proliferation of LLMs going to help reduce prices? I mean, I would say at some point, yes. But, at the same time, the investors are going to want to recoup their investments. So, they're not going to be giving this stuff away for free. I mean, there are, of course, some drawbacks, around cost, and even focus and processing and everything else. I mean, there's a lot of use cases out there that are solved in the capture and IDP market with OCR, and to take it a level further with some of this, some of these dedicated IDP AI, models that have been developed off these open source AI engines. So, is a Swiss Army knife always the best tool for the job? Do you need to rent a Lamborghini to drive around the block? Those are some of the questions that you need to weigh the pluses and minuses there. And I'll just make a quick analogy. I mean, if you look at let's compare cell phones, right, to if I'm going to compare cell phones to LLMs, I mean, those are kind of the two of the areas where we've seen the most development, technology investment probably in the last 20 years. And, cell phones and cameras are increasingly improving, and, you can take great videos. And I've seen applications where you can take a video stream of a captured stack of documents, just keep flipping them over and over. And, the software can kind of separate out the documents, pick the best versions. So, I mean, you can do some pretty cool stuff, but, document scanners, while they're great technology, they're not evolving half as fast as cell phones, but, they're focused and they do the job, and there's still a big market out there for millions of document scanners being sold every year. So, yeah, I don't think LLMs are going to, replace capture, but, some of the, they can add stuff like, increased flexibility. They can improve the setup. They can be used as a tool to improve the technology. And, eventually I think we'll see the pricing settle down as the market becomes more mature. But, as I said before, it's early on. As a capture vendor, you really need to look at this and make it part of your, at least consider it as part of your strategy. You can't just, I don't think you can dismiss them out of hand. So that's kind of what I had for today. So at this point, Aaron, how's the chat feature, the Q&A looking?
Yeah, we've got some good questions and also some good commentary. So I'll just start with the first one. Your matrix lumped together capture and IDP in one category. Do you have segregated reports, for example, capture without IDP?
Yeah, as I said, go back to, let's see, since I have the ability to do this, let's go back to our definition of capture, right? I mean, we feel capture, we've always looked at capture as being able to, work with unstructured documents and take it and process it and use it in a business transaction, and be integrated with workflow and an end-to-end document process. And, we feel the injection of AI, which is really what IDP is just, is an extension of the vision that Infosource has always had for capture. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, paper. I guess I'm not sure what people mean when they talk about capture, because we've always had this vision of advanced capture or intelligent capture as being where the market was headed. If you're talking about just scanning paper, that's really not that interesting of a market anymore. I mean, there's still a lot of paper to scan out there, but the vendors we talk to, it increasingly moves to electronic input, whether that be PDFs, various types of unstructured input. And we really think capture and IDP go hand in hand, and they are not necessarily separate markets.
Okay, and with regard to that matrix as well, when we see tungsten in your report, should we assume that it grandfathers in the history of Kofax?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that includes everything. Kofax, tungsten is Kofax, right? I mean, tungsten is a name, is a corporation that's a small, used to be OB10 invoice processing vendor that, Kofax acquired. for whatever reason, even though Kofax had a strong global brand, maybe people thought that was associated too much with paper scanning. Let's say people, but the executives or who's ever managing, and they decided to use the name Tungsten. But Tungsten is legacy Kofax.
Okay, thank you. All right, here's another one. The current interest in AI reminds me very much of the early days of IDP. Basically, there was lots of overselling the capability to create intelligent content. Since IDP is still somewhat difficult and far from perfect, are people seriously considering getting clean data into their LLMs/AI systems, or in their zest to do something with AI, are they just onboarding digital junkyards of garbage data into their AI systems?
That's an interesting question. Well, so yeah, I mean, just to be clear, IDP is based on AI. IDP is more of a based on dedicated models. Generative AI built on these large language models. So let's say IDP applications are built on, more general models or smaller models, but generative AI is built on large language models. I mean, part of this is interesting. There is, yes, it does help maybe it gives the LLMs, if you have more dedicated, more focused material, the LLM should return more focused and processed result. But if you look at the big picture, the LLMs continue to become more powerful. The LLMs should be able to sort through some of this themselves, depending on, this is some of the cool stuff I mentioned kind of in, I think is it in this slide? Maybe it's the next one here. But we're seeing, stuff like, training, the ability to train LLMs on your own documents and vertical LLMs being introduced. So just, depending on how these LLMs are built, they should themselves be able to clean up the data. Now, granted, like I said, is it using a Lamborghini to drive around the block? And I know Wayne Ford's on this call, and shout out to Wayne for sharing that analogy with me in an earlier conversation. But or is it is it the idea of can you run them through the IDP engines first and narrow it down and just do it there? It's really where do you want to run this narrowing process? But the LLMs are going to become more powerful and more focused, and you can see the investment that's being made, and this money's got to go somewhere. They're going to improve these LLMs, and some of those improvements are going to help with this whole idea of cleaner output and more focused output.
Okay, thank you, Ralph. Here's another question. In the check recognition technology that we integrate, the push to AI has been increasing requirements for servers with GPUs. Are you seeing this creep into IDP products as well?
Well, yeah, servers with GPUs, yeah. Basically, if you're doing anything against an LLM, yes, you need more processing power. And this is one of the reasons we see for the price delta between, an IDP application with a dedicated, AI model versus one that leverages a large language model. Now, granted, I've seen some interesting stuff with prompt engineering to kind of reduce the GPUs that you need to do. And as some of these LLMs become more focused, there's going to be a hopefully a reduction in that. Although, of course, we're seeing more and more processing power out there as well. But I mean, basically, if you want more power, right? And I mean, a check recognition, I mean, one of the things we have seen is a tremendous improvement in handwriting recognition capabilities, but not due to LLMs, mainly due to the dedicated the dedicated AI or the trained for handwriting. Much great improvements in handwriting recognition, but yes, it is going to require more LLM, or more processing power. So that's the bottom line is, the more processing power you use, the more GPUs you need. and LLMs use a lot of processing power. We do probably need to harness that for price reductions, sustainability and other reasons. And I think we will see investment in that, in the future.
Okay, thanks. So how do you see that matrix looking in 5 to 10 years? Who do you think the leaders will be?
Yeah, that's kind of a complex question. So one of the things so we've kind of seen in the market, right? I mean, as I talked about, there's this idea of this idea of but evolution versus revolution, right? I mean, AI technology promises to be a revolutionary technology, but the market is more evolutionary. So, we've kind of seen if someone's, there's a lot of processes in place, right? I mean, the capture market was a, multi-billion-dollar market before anyone, ever heard of AI. Now, granted, we needed AI. AI has been a great shot in the arm, but, a lot of business transactions had already been addressed. Anything that had a structured or a semi-structured form was already addressed with OCR driven and maybe some minor AI. Now, granted, AI has done a great job broadening, creating more flexibility, but we've seen a lot of that stuff kind of implemented on top of existing applications. So I don't necessarily see the people who are the market leaders going away, unless of course, they run into some, not because of the market, but companies can run into financial difficulties for a number of reasons. But, I do see there is room there is still room for what do I say, merger acquisition, consolidation, I guess is the term I'm looking for, because there's really, I mean, the market has grown from maybe 30, 40 vendors we cover to hundreds of vendors we cover. And the AI technology has made it accessible. If you look at some of the vendors who crept up this year, it's vendors that had customer bases in other areas. So like, UiPath had an RPA customer base. Highland kind of has this content services customer base. Microsoft has, this general office population customer base. These vendors have been able to leverage those customer bases, leverage AI, create a viable capture and IDP solution. So I see more types of maybe these enterprise vendors, that really embrace the technology and embrace the market, kind of moving into this space. So I definitely see some of that. Some of the leaders have to be careful. They can't get stale, right? I mean, there's still there's still opportunity for that. I mean, and we talk about this idea of end-to-end processing. And so one of the cool things I think what you can do with AI is you can not only do capture and IDP with the AI, you can also automate processes. So I think, vendors who kind of jump on and use generative AI and AI in general to really deeply understand a process end to end, as opposed to, you got to understand the documents, you got to apply capture and IDP to that. But can you also leverage AI, kind of in the next step to run a workflow, kind of depending what you get from that capture and IDP. So yeah, I really see some, some enterprise and some vertically focused vendors kind of moving into that star category, and continue to see new entrants for some enterprise vendors, and maybe some consolidation among the dedicated IDP vendors as some of these other companies seek to get into the market and seek to accelerate their development.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question, which is, will Gen AI lead to the commoditization of the capture and IDP markets?
So I can say is that, so I hope not, not just from a market sustainability standpoint, because I guess my thought on that is that capture and IDP is really hard to do. I mean, we've had companies that have been working at this for 30 years to really, perfect it to where you're getting straight through, 90% accuracy rates. And if generative AI, gets to that level where it can do that type of thing, even though that's not its main focus, if it can just do that type of stuff out of the box, yeah, who knows what else it's going to be able to do. So, that would make it kind of a scary application. So I don't think so. I think it will be an integral part. I think it'll be every bit as important as OCR, and every bit as important as these IDP engines. But I think it's always going to be a tool that application vendors are going to have to leverage to create solutions for capture and IDP.
Okay. I think that covers the questions that we had. There is some good discussion going on in the chat, which I like to see. I'll conclude the Q&A with a nice comment in there. Ralph Gammon is iconic and our hero, as he is the official historian of this market.
And the book will be out in a couple of years.
So with that, I think we can give folks a little bit of time back in their day, but I do want to point out, if you have additional questions after this presentation or we did not cover your question, feel free to email either of us, rg@info-source.com or ed@info-source.com. Also, we're targeting September 5th for our next webinar, so stay tuned for more information. We really appreciate everybody joining us today and hope the rest of your day, evening is great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Good. I appreciate all the attendees. We'll reach out if you like.
Thank you, Ralph.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.